and I'm truly inspired by the energy of this day. At this time, please join me in welcoming our panel of educators who will offer their insights into some of the questions about personalizing learning shared by you on Facebook and Twitter. Let's start by having each of you introduce yourselves. Please tell us your name and what and where you teach.
Well, my name is Dr. Jeff Kim, National Board Certified Teacher. I teach in the Anaheim Union High School District. There I am a History Department Chair. They also have this position called the Lesson Design Coach. And I have the opportunity and privilege to support and be a teacher leader there.
Hi, my name is Thuy Vi. I am a National Board Certified Teacher. I teach special education for Long Beach Unified School District.
I'm Sarah Cassidy. I teach science and special education in San Diego, and I'm also an executive function coach, advocate for students with ADHD.
Thank you, and welcome to the stage. We have some questions that have been sent in. We're going to ask each of the panelists one question at a time, and then if there's time for them to add to those responses, we can do that. This first question was sent in by Mark Wall, and this is going to go to Sarah. What are some innovative strategies to engage disenfranchised students?
I appreciate this question, Mark, and I think my first step is to challenge my narrative about disenfranchised students. I think that if students are showing up, there's still something in there that we can access. I also think I can't leave any space in my brain for failure. And what I mean is I can't believe, even though statistically I know probably some of my students will fail, I can't let myself believe that they might fail, because then that would drive my actions. So I think a lot of the innovation comes from our own perspectives and how we approach students, because we have the experience. It's just once we access that part of our brain by kind of breaking down the barriers that we put up in considering students disenfranchised, I think once we get past those barriers, it kind of naturally comes with the experience to know how to approach them.
Wow, yeah, the perspective really does make a difference. Thank you. V, this one's for you. How can personalized learning help to strengthen a sense of community when there's so much uncertainty in our students' lives?
Thank you. Don't think that I'm cheesy, but for me, a big part of personalized learning is understanding who my students are and who their families are. I need to know where they come from, what are their cultural system of beliefs, what are their aspirations, challenges, financial situations. So I have to have this knowledge in order to personalize my learning for my students. And when I do this with that knowledge, I can really help support my students in the classroom by tailoring my instruction and how I work with them to support them. So I can use that knowledge, use the resources at my disposal, like community resources, school resources, to provide services and support for my students.
Wow, thank you. Jeff, this next question is one that we wanted you to field. How do you provide both enough freedom for students to be creative and independent, while also providing guidance so that their time at school is productive?
Yeah, Mark, great question. I think we have an amazing opportunity today in schools to try so many different kinds of things, to take healthy risks. We have project-based learning. We have writing opportunities, literacy. We have the opportunity to incorporate civic learning. I know in the first couple of weeks, one thing I do is I strive to build a community in my classroom. And I'm reminded of a student in my class who, when I first met them, when I asked him to just share his name, he actually cried on the first day. And he was a special needs student. And that's the worst feeling as a teacher, right? Making your students cry on the first day. But as the year progressed, we provided an opportunity for that student to engage in civic dialogue, civic discourse, providing scaffolding. And I challenged them and I asked them, what is something you are passionate about? And you know our youth today, and I've heard this said, they are not apathetic. They are uninvited. So what I did was I invited them to consider something that they're passionate about, and the students created a 2-minute passion speech. Sometimes it's referred to as a soapbox speech on an issue that they cared about deeply. And in world history, we're looking at global issues like environmental issues, poverty, water. And this student, the same student who cried on his first day, he gave the most amazing speech, and I awarded him the award for the greatest effort at the very end of the school year. And we have that opportunity to provide that kind of flexibility and independence in our curriculum.
Wow. Yeah. So, yeah, amazing. Wow. So what I'm hearing from each of you is this sense of really believing in your students, seeing the potential within them, and then finding ways to connect them to curriculum in ways that are relevant and meaningful, and actually allowing them to be producers, right? To produce knowledge, to produce these powerful statements about something they really care about. That's definitely along the lines of personalizing learning, the theme of this conference. Sarah, I want to ask you to take this fourth question. The question is, what ideas do you have on how to get to know the whole child, foundational to any personalized learning strategies? For all the things you've talked about, this getting to know your students is so essential. What are some things you do to get to know your students?
I love this question, thank you. There's so many ways, and I know some of these are going to sound like, oh yeah, I do that, but you can't overvalue some of the basics. Greeting the students at the door, saying that you're glad that they're there. I'm a big fan of using a little bit of social time to get to know my students, so we have lunch together every Friday in the classroom, and that's a great opportunity for me to learn more about what they like, what they don't like, what they eat, what they don't eat, and just really get to know them deeply. I'm a big fan of like hacking the system so that we work smarter, not harder. And I have found that annotating my notebook is a great way for me to kind of like salesperson, keep track of what I've learned about my students, and then also make plans to follow up. And that way, I mean, it's always genuine, but sometimes we forget, especially if you teach 100 students a day. So it's a great way to reflect on like, oh, so-and-so shared this, but then also make sure that you're mindfully connecting with students, and not just your high flyers, but also the students who were brave enough to share something with you that you planned the next week to share with them.
Yeah. V, Jeff, do you have anything you want to add to this question about getting to know students?
For me, it's just having authentic conversations with them. In my class, I have this student, and I would call him Timothy, comes from a very rough neighborhood, and he gives me a hard time every day. And it's so hard to like the kid. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to like all the kids, right? But it was just so hard for me, and I couldn't understand why he's having such a hard time. But after talking to him, I discovered his family situations and the reason why he was acting like that. So I made a point with him, check in with me every day, 5 minutes before school start, and that kind of helped him kind of balance his day out. Yeah.
Wow. So I'm hearing getting to know your students in authentic ways, and also being advocates for them, right? They face a lot of challenges, and it's good to know that someone's on their side so they don't feel so isolated. That's beautiful. I'm going to ask the next question to Jeff. What are some of the ideal conditions for teachers to grow, right? We've been sharing ideas today at Better Together. What are some ideas you have for helping teachers to grow in their use of personalized learning?
Once again, as lesson design coach, I get to work with a great team of teachers. And once again, we're in a school where, there are a lot of challenges. Students are coming, and sometimes they've experienced some deep hurt. But, and then because of that, it can make it challenging, and there's some challenges that they might experience. But I think what's important is to really celebrate the bright points, the bright lights. And so one thing that I do is, as teachers are sharing, and we have a community where it's safe to share, we share strategies that are working, promising practices, and we celebrate these things. In fact, I send out these tips. Last year I called them LDC tips, lesson design tips, but this year I'm going to call it FSF tips, family supporting family, because that's what we have to be at a school. We are self, we are family, we've got to treat each other like family and support one another in that kind of way, celebrating the successes.
Yeah. Wow, that's wonderful. Sarah, do you have anything to add to that? I know you also work with teachers in a kind of coaching role as well.
I do. I think really hearing each other, and making sure that we're listening for when we reflect our narrative. So the way we talk about kids sometimes reveals those beliefs that are driving our decisions. So really hearing ourselves and then gently holding each other accountable to speak well of kids and to reflect on, maybe there's a misunderstanding from where you're coming from, or like you were sharing, like what's the background of the student. And then, I think just opening the dialogue like we're doing today and like we plan to throughout our network through Better Together, I think is huge, because it can be super isolating to teach.
Yeah, so just as some of our students can feel isolated, teachers can get that way too. So the importance of seeing your colleagues as family, we're in this together, and also knowing that we can have disagreements, families have disagreements, I think, and still be on the same page and moving in the same direction and learn from each other. So thank you for that. V, I'm going to ask you to take this last one initially, at least. What is it you recommend as one or two first steps for a teacher who's looking to bring elements of personalized learning into her or his practice?
Sure. I know you're gonna grumble and groan, but my recommendation is use data to drive instruction. And by data, I just don't mean academic achievement data, but also data about the students. Talk to them, have conversation with them, talk to their former teachers, their family, to really find out what their needs are, what are their strengths, what are their interests in, what are their motivation, because without those information, you cannot personalize learning for them, right? You can have this great lesson, but if you don't engage them, you're gonna lose them. So I think for me, use your data to guide instruction. That's what I would recommend as part of the personalized learning.
Yeah, wow, and it really makes me think back to this morning's keynote with Sir Ken. His comment that teaching is about education, right? It's not about delivering content. We are teaching, we're educating students who are learners. So looking for ways to engage them in ways that they can feel connected to the learning, I think is quite powerful. Any last comment you'd like to make, a resource you might want to share with folks before we wrap up here? Please.
I think it's a great opportunity as we're opening the school year as we're teaching our protocols, to do fun stuff. I think we're so eager to get into content, but just to get buy-in, and some of the protocol teaching steps can actually be get to know you things so that you can learn more about your students as they're learning the structure of the classroom. And you wanted to add something too.
I just love coming to Better Together, and I was just talking with a colleague, and whenever we come here, it's like we're pre-gaming for our 2008 season, so Better Together.
Okay, game on. Join me in thanking this amazing panel of teachers for sharing their insights about personalized learning and working in the diverse communities and contexts of California schools. Thank you so much.